Next up, we've got Tony Doan presenting What's New in AWS.
Is this thing on? Hey, there we go. All right, let me just get the slides up in the right place. All right. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about AWS. First, I'm going to plow through this kind of fast. They announced a lot of new stuff this year, and I kind of wanted to hit at least a little bit of everything rather than trying to do any sort of deep dive on a lot of stuff. As I'll hit later, most of this stuff's really early in its development cycle, and so it's probably going to change anyway. All right, so today we are talking about the cloud. And in the cloud, if real clouds moved as fast as Amazon did, we'd probably end up with one of these. So Amazon has their annual conference. It's called Reinvent. And this year, they delivered big jabs to old IT. They talked about hip things like the Internet of Things. They delivered snowballs through a fire hose. I give you 100 points if anybody can name that movie. All right. So, they also gave us warm, snuggy new services that keep our security people happy. And we've delivered new Whopper-sized instances. And, of course, much, much more. So, who uses AWS? Who, that's like their primary thing. They don't have a data center. They don't have anything else. Just everything's in AWS. Oh, all right. Fewer than I thought. Who here has split their stuff into multiple AWS accounts since my last talk? All right. Excellent. So, every year, AWS drops a bunch of new services or new features to existing services. And this year was no different. But first, a quick public service announcement. They do this, of course, every year. And they put out a lot of services, and I kind of call them pre-beta. They call them preview. They have a list of cycles that their products go through before they come out, although they don't always all seem to follow the same path on the way to being shipped. So who knows why? The important thing to know is from the moment they get announced at reInvent, it can take quite a while before you can use them in production. So they get us all excited, and then you can wait 6 to 12 months before you can really use it. So Aurora was a good example. It took from November 2014 all the way up to July of this year before you could actually use it. Here's a couple of services they announced last year. They may look familiar because you probably only started using them this year. All right, so enough about that. On to this year's new exciting stuff. The first thing out of the gate, normally they announce everything at the keynotes, but this one got announced like 9 a.m. on the first day of the conference. So a WAF, or a Web Application Firewall, is something that you put between the world and your web application. And it lets you create rules and things that hopefully block common exploits from getting into your application. So you can write rules that look for SQL injection and cross-site scripting and so on. And they have a bunch of rules they provide, and then they also provide you the ability to write some of your own rules. And then you get to decide, do you just want to log that somebody did something bad, or do you want to actually not deliver that request to your application? So usually when you're developing a new rule, you're going to do that first before you risk not selling something to somebody. Okay. The WAF also came full out of the gate. There no preview, no beta. It was ready to go on day one. Also, you'll notice some of these services will get delivered in some regions before they get delivered in other regions. The WAF is very different. It actually gets delivered from their edge locations, just like Route 53 and CloudFront. So they have I forget how many it is, like 60 edge locations around the world, far more than they have regions. And so the WAF is actually delivered from there. So it's ready to use today. The pricing is kind of weird, but it's primarily based on how many rules you turn on, and then, of course, how many requests your web application actually gets. One gotcha is you have to be using CloudFront. CloudFront is their CDN. I mentioned that it ran out of the edge locations. Well, guess what? That's because it's actually a feature of CloudFront, really. So if you're not using CloudFront, this doesn't help you. If you are using CloudFront, it's great, and they make it really easy to take one set of rules and apply it to multiple sites if you run a whole bunch of stuff out of CloudFront, which is kind of cool. All right, quick site. So this is one of the big jabs at big old IT. This is basically, so it's business intelligence for whatever that means to anybody. But it could be very much compared to something like Cognos or Tableau. Tableau is kind of the new kid on the block, and Cognos is an IBM thing that's been around forever. But basically, you throw tons and tons of whatever kind of business data you've got, and it lets you visualize it and do fun stuff with it. They obviously put this out in really intentionally trying to be disruptive, right? They priced it that way. They're marketing it that way. They want this to be a game changer. We'll see if it is. More importantly, for them, underneath, to get it to do anything, it is, of course, 100% dependent on other AWS services that you, of course, have to pay for. Things like S3, Redshift, and that kind of thing. This one is currently in preview, so you can sign up. You actually have to go through a sign-up form. You can log in and play with it. Things will change between now and when it ships, but for the people that are really interested in it, you can go ahead and get into it today. The pricing goes as low as $9 a user. And I don't know if anybody's priced Cognos recently, but that's pretty cheap. It depends on whether you're paying the users monthly or if you pay for a whole year up front. So if you pay for a whole year up front, you get the $9 price, and it goes up as high as $24 the other ways. And there are 2 levels of service. There is standard and enterprise. I'll let you read their documents to try and figure out what's the difference. Okay, a little warning. Whoops, pushed the wrong button. There we go. A little warning. So when it comes to AWS services, they're usually named pretty boringly. They're all 3-letter acronyms, except S3, which if you actually spread it out is 3. But anyway. But these next 2 services really, in my opinion, have jumped the shark. I'll give another 100 points if anybody can name where this came from. Yes, that is Fonzie. And believe it or not, there is a shark in that thing down there. That's, in fact, where the phrase jump the shark came from. Okay. So the first one is called Snowball. Who would name a service Snowball? Not me. It is, in fact, a giant gray box. And inside the giant gray box is a whole bunch of disk. And the idea is, a long time ago, Amazon added a service called the import-export service. And you could take, say, a terabyte drive, fill it with stuff, mail it to Amazon. They would plug it in and drop it in an S3 bucket for you. Okay? But that wasn't enough. They had customers, big customers coming to them saying, we have 250 petabytes of data. And we did the math with our internet connection speed, and that's going to take 100 years. So we'd like a faster way to get this data in here. And I don't know if you guys remember the old joke, never underestimate the bandwidth, the throughput of a station wagon loaded full of tape, basically, right? It takes a long time to get there, but when it gets there, it drops it all at once, right? So anyway, the Snowball is, like I said, a giant box. It has 50 terabytes or thereabouts of disk. It is very drop resistant. They took great joy in dropping it a lot at the conference to show you that it was drop resistant. It has a big 10 gig Ethernet interface on the back that they give you various adapters in case you need them to talk to different kinds of 10 gig interfaces. And then basically what happens, they ship it to you, you put it on the floor next to your desk, you plug it into your network, you install this client on your machine, and then whatever your machine can access, whether it's an NFS mount, whatever you have access to, because they didn't want to limit it to a certain type of file system or anything else. That's why the client goes on there. You can copy it to the Snowball. And the Snowball encrypts everything as it goes in. So while it's being pushed through the mail and everything, it's in good shape. Something you may not have been clear on that picture real quick, but on the front, there's a thing that looks like the shipping label, so it knows where it goes. That's actually a Kindle Paperwhite. Now, it's kind of a neat idea, right? The Kindle White doesn't actually use any battery once you tell the screen to display something, right? So it'll stay there forever. So they say that the reason they do that is because people accidentally ship stuff to the wrong place all the time. So what happens is when this thing arrives at your site and you use it for the first time, it knows it's been used and it flips the shipping label to be the return address. So you can't accidentally ship it to the wrong place. I think they had some extra Paperwhites in the storage and they were trying to get rid of them. But that's just me. So it's $200 a job. I'm not exactly sure what a job is. I think that's one Snowball kind of round trip. If you're copying data in, just like the import-export service, it's free. As long as you're putting your data into their system, which means you're going to consume lots of other services to use said data, they don't charge you anything for it. If you want it back out, it's 3 cents a gig. Shipping is extra, and sorry, your Prime membership does not help you here. Yeah, I know. All right, so the next one is called Kinesis Firehose, and yes, I said Firehose. I can't believe it. Okay, if you used something called Kinesis in the past, they had a service called Kinesis. It's been renamed Kinesis Streams, and this is now an add-on to Kinesis Streams called Firehose. The way Kinesis Streams worked is you told it, I'm going to send you X bajillion messages, and I need a queue to push them through. But it still left it up to you to both push them in and take them out. So a lot of people said, well, that's great, but I'm still kind of doing most of the work. The Kinesis Firehose basically puts the back end on there for you, so you set the whole thing up, and it auto-delivers it to your DynamoDB database, or it auto-delivers it to your S3 bucket, or your Redshift, or whatever you want. So they're trying to automate Kinesis and make it a little more useful for everybody. It's already currently available in those 3 regions. 2 regions? 3 regions. There we go. So it's fully available. It's not a preview or anything. It's just not in every region yet. All right, enough about fire hoses. Oh, wait, no. And it's priced at 3.5 cents per gigabyte ingested, plus the cost of whatever service you're stuffing the data into, of course. There's a motto, I think, at AWS. They get you coming and going. The way I question.
For our live stream audience. Here you go. Sorry. No problem.
So what's the capacity of the Snowball?
50 terabytes.
50 terabytes, okay.
So if you have more than that, they will ship you multiple Snowballs.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, you get it for 10 days when they get it. So you have 10 days to pump 50 terabytes into it. If you keep it longer than that, it's like the old Blockbuster fees, and they'll charge you an extra $15 a day. And no, you don't have to rewind it before you send it back. All right, this one I'm pretty excited about. So this one's called the Database Migration Service. And as I said, part of their theme this year seemed to be taking on old guard IT. So if you're tired of paying Oracle or Sybase or whoever big database fees, and you want to get your data out of that database and into another database, but you didn't want to do it because it's a really hard thing to do, they're trying to build a service that completely automates it. Beyond that, it not just like gives you a database and then leaves you to do it. It copies the data, and then once it's there, it'll continually keep it up to date. So you can start testing against the new database, and then when you're ready, you cut over and finally let go of the old database. Now you might think, okay, this is great. I've got stuff in my data center. I want to get it into AWS. I can use the database migration service. You can, and in fact, they even let you do it the other way around. If you've got data in RDS and you want to push it back into your data center, so you don't feel trapped. So they've got you covered both ways. Now, as far as how it's really going to work, I think this one's very much in preview. It remains to be seen how, like, every little detail. So obviously mapping one type of integer to another type of integer on two different versions of SQL is not that hard to do. But what happens if one database you're coming from has triggers, stored procedures, all kinds of fancy stuff that you have in Oracle, and you're going to MySQL? So I don't know how it's supposedly going to handle all that. I'm sure some of it will be left as an exercise for the reader. Like I said, it's in preview, so it's likely to change. But if you're interested in it, it's something you think you're going to have coming up, you can sign up and start playing with it today. The pricing on it's kind of interesting. So like I said, not only does it migrate your data, but it keeps it up to date. So basically, it fires up an EC2 instance that does this. And so the cost of it is just the cost of that instance. So the longer you leave it updating your new database, the more you keep paying for the instance. And depending on the size of your data and how much change you're going to have and all that, you can pick a different sized instance for the data migration instance. So you're going to pay however much that instance costs. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. Config rules. If you want to take a nap, this is the good time. Most people don't care about compliance. So to be brief, the idea here is you've got lots of stuff in AWS. You've got lots of different people in your organization who put that stuff in AWS. Do you know they all do it the same way? Is it all scripted so you're sure of that? Do you have a rule in your company that everything must be encrypted? I do. Do you know if somebody accidentally creates an unencrypted EBS volume? Well, I do because I wrote a tool. But this is a tool to do it for you. And as I said, speaking as someone who had to write a tool to basically do this because they didn't have it, it's really nice that it's native. That's something we keep finding with AWS. If you find you have a need and you're writing something to do a lot of AWS work, just wait a year. They might actually just do it for you. All right. Also currently in preview. So you pay a very tiny, tiny amount per config item recorded. But if you have a lot of accounts, like we have over 400 some odd AWS accounts, and it keeps growing every week, with a lot of machines in it, that actually will eventually turn into real money, I guess. Okay, MariaDB. This is another at Oracle. So if you're one of those people using MySQL and worried that Oracle might someday change the license on it or do something else nasty to it, you can now migrate to MariaDB, get the exact same software, but it's not owned by Oracle. They started with version, what is that, 10.17? And they'll be keeping that up to date. It has all the same services that all the other RDS stuff does, so it can do auto replication, all the fun stuff, because it's basically just a fork of MySQL, right? So, but just in case you really don't want Oracle in your face, now you have a choice. So we have the new X1 instance types. Who needs 2 terabytes of memory? Anyone? So this kind of goes along with the QuickSight from the beginning. One of the big features of QuickSight is that you can use this technology called SPICE, which basically means you do everything in memory. So if you've got petabytes of data to look at, you're going to try and look at it in 2 terabyte slices and do it all in memory. So these will be available at the beginning of next year. You get 4 real Xenon processors. In AWS speak, that is 100 vCPUs. And like I said, 2 terabytes of memory. So last year, they announced Lambda. Anybody using Lambda? So Lambda is this concept where you write script, and in fact, originally all it took was Node.js style JavaScript. And you send it to AWS, and they run it for you, and you get something back. But you didn't have to spin up an EC2 instance. You didn't have to do anything else. So they call it serverless computing. It just means the servers are somebody else's. Since then, they've added Java as another option of being able to submit things. But anyway, this year, they added a ton of new features. You can do Python now, and there's rumors of more languages coming. VPC support, so if you use VPCs in AWS, and you really should, this means that your function will now run within your VPC instead of off in some corner of AWS. Personally, that scares the crap out of me, but it's okay. You can also now schedule your Lambda functions. So it used to be if you wanted them to run on any sort of regular basis, you still needed a machine that ran cron that would then say Lambda. Well, now you can go into the Lambda control panel and say, run this job at 5 a.m. every day. It's kind of cool. And function versioning and stuff. This is all available today. Not preview, not anything, fully ready to go. All right, as a security guy, this one was the most interesting to me, so I'll go real fast. Basically, it's a security assessment tool, and involves putting an agent on your instance, and what you do is you put this agent on there, and then you tell it to start monitoring, and then you run your app, whatever it is, web app, whatever. And then when it's done, you tell it to stop. And then it sends you a report. And meanwhile, it's basically hooked in at the kernel level, and it's watched everything that's happened on your machine. And it can identify a ton of security vulnerabilities. It can tell you that you loaded a shared library that's world writable. So you have a local privilege escalation problem. It's pretty cool. This one is also in very early preview. Currently, they have written a set of rules that you can turn on which rules you run when you tell it to start monitoring, but you can't write your own rules yet. You get some very nice reports out of it. They're looking at trying to figure out, how to make this help you with your PCI compliance and that sort of thing as well. And I said it's in preview. Mobile hub. So mobile is everything, they tell me. Anybody writing a mobile application? Yeah, a few of you. So this is kind of cool. What they did is they basically took all the other AWS services that you might actually want to use from a mobile application and kind of bundled them together, hence hub. And then they gave you a simpler, lighter weight version of the SDK that lets you kind of talk to those services all together. And again, the idea with the lighter weight is that you can run it on the mobile device and so on. So as examples, you probably don't want to deal with authenticating your users. You can offload that onto them. Data storage, everybody has to store data, even if it's the high score for your very angry thing flying through the air. Lets you get to Lambda. A lot of people in the gaming industry are interested in Lambda. It's kind of interesting. And then on the other end, you get back analytics and app testing and so on, so you can figure out. This one's in beta, which is one level better than preview. And you can start playing with that one today. The internet, oops, I said that already. There we go. The Internet of Things. Ooh, I could watch those all day. Okay. They really want people building tiny devices, whether it's your light bulb with a Wi-Fi in it or whatever. They want you to start sending all that data to AWS. So they basically provided a new type of message pipe, and you can send all your messages from your little, whether it's your Nest telling, somebody's here, somebody's not. You can just send these tiny little packets to Amazon, and you don't have to worry about scaling it or anything because they've already got that kind of handled. You can do it over HTTP or one of the MQ kind of things. It's all over SSL. The message blocks are 512 bytes long, so that means if you have a 900 byte payload, you pay for 2 messages. No rounding off, sorry. Once the data gets there, this is kind of the interesting part. Instead of just, again, spinning up an instance and then calling APIs and consuming the data yourself, you can create rules that tell it to deliver the data directly to some other AWS service, like Dynamo or something, right? And interestingly enough, let me go to the next slide. The messages you directly deliver to another AWS service, you don't get charged for. So you just, of course, pay everybody now for the service you're already consuming. Yes, all right. What's next? If you are interested in keeping up with this stuff all year long, instead of just waiting for the big blast, they have their main blog, and they also have the What's New page. And of course, if you're lucky, you can convince your boss to send you to Vegas and go to reInvent in 2016. And that's it.